Please welcome Richard Brown, Vice President, American Express Philanthropy, and a member of the Elevate Task Force.
Hello, and welcome to the opening keynote address for Elevate 2019. American Express is committed to providing opportunities like this to build critical skills that enable you to be successful social impact leaders. Understanding workforce trends such as equity is critical to our success, regardless of our sector or mission focus. So thank you for taking this important step in building both your own capacity and that of your organization. Our first speaker is Lucy Adams, CEO of Disruptive HR. She will be addressing the shifting needs of our workforce and how we can better serve this critical stakeholder group. Lucy is joining us from London today, so she might be the person who has traveled the furthest to be here. Of course, I'm teasing, but it does show how we can use technology and innovative solutions such as Elevate to mitigate the need for expensive travel. In addition to being a quality learning experience, it is also friendly to be both budget and the environment. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Lucy to the Elevate stage.
Hi Elevate, my name is Lucy Adams and I'm the CEO of Disruptive HR. And what I want to talk to you about today is just some of the new ways in which we're seeing organisations just waking up to the fact that they need to lead their people in very different ways. They need to engage them, develop them, reward them, just treat them in very different ways to make it relevant for a disrupted world. So what I want to do is just share a little bit about how I reach those conclusions and then offer you a new way of thinking about how to lead people in a disrupted world and give you lots of practical examples about how organisations are doing it today. So I like to describe myself as a recovering HR director. A recovering HR director because I was an HR director for many years. And I just got really sick of it. I got really tired of working really hard and my team working really hard and producing all of these different programs and initiatives and processes and then taking it out to the business leaders and the employees and then being really indifferent. I got really tired of going out for dinner, sitting next to somebody I hadn't met before, and them asking me what I did, and when I say, oh, I'm in HR, them saying, oh, I hate HR. But mainly I got tired of producing old-fashioned and increasingly irrelevant ways of doing HR and realised that actually it just didn't cut it anymore and that we needed something very different. So I now run Disruptive HR, and it's an organisation that works with leaders and HR professionals to help them think very differently about the way that HR can be done, the way that leadership can be done. And if you like what you hear and you maybe want to access some free resources, then you're more than welcome to go to our website, disruptivehr.com, and on there you'll find plenty of blogs and diagnostics and things like infographics that might help you if you're interested. So let's start with a little bit about my background. I was the HR director for some fairly large organisations and most recently at the BBC. And the BBC, obviously large public service organisation, but also trying to compete with the likes of Netflix and YouTube and Amazon even. So we went going through some amazing changes in the time that I was there. I was there for 5 years. If you just think about the way in which we watch television or listen to the radio has completely changed. You know, when I was growing up, we had 3 channels in the UK. We had BBC One, BBC Two, the commercial channel, and then we had a newcomer, Channel 4, imaginatively named Channel 4, in the 80s. And if you wanted to watch your favourite programme, you had to be sat on the sofa next to your mum and dad, waiting for your favourite programme to come round. Well, these days, you think how many of you have got Netflix? How many of you will have Amazon Prime, an online retailer producing original content. We don't just want to watch a program passively, we want to dual screen. So we want to be watching something on television, but also we want to be contributing to it. We want to be commenting on it. So we're using our two screens. We also binge watch. You know, the days of waiting for your favourite program to come round and waiting for that episode every week at 8 o'clock, you know, those days are gone. We want to download everything and watch it over the course of a weekend. Although Game of Thrones new season is proving quite tricky to do that with. We also want to start watching television in our living rooms, our lounges, and then we want to download it onto our phone or our iPad and watch it whilst we're travelling. All of this meant that the people who worked at the BBC needed to have new skills, new attitudes to how to schedule and distribute media. They needed to work in very different ways. They needed to get equipped for dealing with a very different competitive landscape. You know, I can remember being at the board meeting where we were told that Amazon, an online retailer, was going to start producing original television and radio television programs. And we just laughed, you know, we were like, what are they going to do, a shopping channel? Within weeks, months, there they were producing incredible content. So, new skills, new attitudes, new ways of doing things. We also had to collaborate far more in the period I was there. You know, the BBC, like many organisations, has a number of tribes. We have Tribe Television, Tribe Radio, Tribe Online, the newest tribe, Tribe News. And each of those tribes had really operated very, very independently of one another. In fact, their entire kind of rationale was, let's protect our own people, let's protect our own budgets, let's protect our own kit, let's protect our own audiences. And there wasn't a huge amount of collaboration going on. Well, digital kind of changes all of that, doesn't it? You know, is television a television product or is it an online product? And of course, it's both. So increasingly, our television people, our news people, needed to collaborate with people in the online space. And that means that they have to think about how they work in very different ways. The team structures look very different. And as leaders and people in HR, our role is to create the conditions where people can collaborate very effectively with one another. In the 5 years that I was there, like many organisations, we were going through huge productivity challenges. We had to save 20% of our cost base, about £700 million a year. And we did that in the usual ways that organisations do it. You manage with 3 rather than 4, and you screw your suppliers a little bit more. But we also had to tackle legacy terms and conditions of our people that were no longer affordable. So if you worked for the BBC, you didn't expect the big salaries, but you did expect a job for life, and you expected to be looked after when you retired. So we had great pension benefits. And in the 5 years that I was there, we made compulsory redundancies for the first time in our history. And we also closed our final salary, our very advantageous benefits scheme for pensions. And this caused real anger from our people, a real sense of betrayal. You know, the deal had changed and what they had expected just was no longer going to be there for them. So we had industrial action, strikes, and lots of complaints and a real sense of anger and betrayal. And you know, obviously in HR, what you're trying to do is to manage your way through this and ensure that leaders are equipped to handle it. We also had the gig economy. So BBC has 20,000 staff, but 60,000 freelancers. And you know, the old days where you would have a week-long induction program, you know, directors aren't going to pay for someone to sit on an induction program for a week or an onboarding program for a week when they are paying for them. You know, they want them on set immediately. And yet at the same time, we still want these freelancers to understand who we are, what our values are, what it means to work in our kind of organisation. We had the rise of social media, the impact of millennials with different expectations of the workplace. We had all of the things that many organisations are going through. And what I've realised since leaving the BBC and now working with pretty much every sector in lots of different geographies all over the world is that every organisation right now is looking for the same four things. They're looking for more agility to cope with the pace of change, to embrace change, to ensure that they are managing a level of disruption that is unprecedented. We're looking for more creativity, innovation to stay ahead of the competition. We're looking for more collaboration to work across boundaries to ensure that that we're meeting the needs of our customers, which cannot necessarily be met by just one department or one geographical area, and those boundaries just don't make sense anymore. And finally, we're looking for more productivity, more for less, all the time, more for less, more efficiencies. Every organisation, in every sector, in every geography, is looking for more agility, more innovation, more collaboration, more productivity. And what have we got in HR to help us create the conditions where people can be more agile, innovative, collaborative and productive? We have the HR manual. And the HR manual was kind of written in about 1980, 1990, and is filled with heavy, big, clunky processes that really just don't make sense anymore. Maybe they never made sense. Maybe they were never really that impactful, but they're really obviously not working now. So what could a new model for HR doing things differently look like? Well, the model that I want to propose to you is called the EACH model. And the EACH model stands for employees as adults, consumers, and human beings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through that model briefly and give you examples about how organisations are treating their people more as adults, more as consumers, and more as human beings. So let's start with adult. So most organisations are incredibly parental. You know, we have the caring parent, and the caring parent is the parent that puts up notices in the loos saying, "Now wash your hands." I remember being at the BBC one afternoon, it had started to snow, and one of my team comes to me and says, "Oh, Lucy, it's time to write the all-staff email." I said, "Okay, what all-staff email is this?" And they said, "Well, when it snows, we write to our people and tell them they should think about going home." I was like, "Well, they can't look out the window? What happens if they don't get the email? Do they just sit there waiting while the snow piles higher and higher?" Of course they don't. They're grown-ups and they're completely capable of making a judgment about the weather and their journey to and from work. And yet something happens when they step over the threshold into the workplace. We feel that as leaders, HR, that we kind of need to look after them, that we need to protect them. If we have the caring parent, we also have the critical parent. And the critical parent is the one that writes all the rules, the one that puts together the processes based around the fact that we don't really trust our people. Well, we don't trust a small percentage of them. And yet what we do in organisations is we draft rules and processes and policies based around that lowest common denominator, based around that small percentage of people who are going to behave badly, and we apply it to everybody else. What we get with this approach to the caring parent and the critical parent is we achieve a level of compliance and passivity amongst our employees. People wait to do as they're told, and they largely do as they're told. They wait for permission. And yet the kind of people we need for the future, the kind of people that we need to cope with some of the disruptions like the ones I described at the BBC, is we need them to take risks. We need them to speak out. We need them to challenge. We need them to try new things. We're not going to get that if we continue to parent them. We're not going to get that from passive and compliant employees. So we're seeing a real move to, instead of treating people as if they were children, treating them as if they were adults. And what does this actually look like? Well, it looks like approach to rulemaking, policy making. You just have to look at an organization like Netflix, who have done amazing work around this idea of freedom within a framework. So there are some broad guidelines, but ultimately we trust you at Netflix to use your judgment. We trust you to do the right thing. In fact, their expenses policy at Netflix is do the right thing by Netflix, not a list of 101 things that you can claim for, that you can't claim for. So freedom within a framework, trusting people to behave as adults, trusting people to do the right things. We see this in the area of things like dress codes. So company Legal and General, they have a dress code which is dress for your day. Not you can wear flip-flops, you can wear jeans, but not with a rip in them. Taking in the idea that actually people do know the right thing, and all we need to do is to provide some guidance and some light touch rulemaking and policy making to enable them to make those kind of decisions. It's not just approaches to rulemaking though, it's also approaches to process development. So if you think about an organisation like Adobe, what they've done with their performance management, their annual appraisal, is they say, you know, we're not going to treat you like a child and take you into a room and give you your feedback and give you a rating like it's your end of year report card. Instead, what they say is, you're a grown-up. We trust you to be interested in how you're contributing, how you're perceived by your colleagues, the impact you're having. Therefore, we expect you to seek out conversations with your line managers and with your colleagues. Its approach to onboarding, a company in the States called Bazaarvoice. What they do is they say, you know what? We're not going to take you into a room when you first start and give you lots and lots of PowerPoint slides about what's expected of you. Instead, here's some information that we want you to digest. Here's some names of people we want you to meet. Here's some places we want you to visit. Over to you. You as a grown-up running your own onboarding program at a time that is right for you, because you know how best you learn, you know how you digest information, you know how you like to introduce yourself to people. Over to you. We're not going to treat you like a child. So a gradual moving away from this parenting to a much more adult-to-adult relationship, putting HR away from this idea of them being a nursemaid or a police officer, instead creating the conditions where people can do their best work. Let's look at the second part of the model now, which is employees as consumers. Now, you know that horrible expression, employees are our greatest assets? We hear that a lot. Employees are our greatest assets. What a horrible expression. You know, assets are buildings and computer equipment and intellectual property. You know, we're talking about human beings. Human beings, beautiful, wonderful, incredible, frustrating, mercurial, annoying as hell employees who all behave very, very differently from one another, have very different needs, wants, expectations, preferences. We've very often in HR seen ourselves as kind of allied to finance, you know, and tried to pretend that we were kind of like finance with our spreadsheets and our return on investment from learning programs and things. Whereas actually I think we need to look at marketing, consumer marketing in particular. There's so much we can learn from them. If you think about what we're trying to do in organizations and what consumer marketing are trying to do with their customers, they're very, very similar. Consumer marketing are trying to change perceptions, change behaviors, and increase brand loyalty. Well, that's what we're trying to do with how we employ people. Change perceptions, change behaviors, and increase brand loyalty. So what can we learn from them? Well, I think there's a couple of things that I want to touch on. First of all, we can learn from the way that they develop and get data and insights into their customers. In organizations, in HR, we tend to have a couple of sources of data. We have our asset register. You know, how many employees have we got? Where are they? What are they costing us? What's their shelf life? And we have the annual engagement survey. The annual engagement survey, by definition, happening once a year, and asks a series of questions at a point in time. We collect all the data in, we produce these very confusing reports, we cascade them through our line managers with cascade action plans. Nothing really happens. It tells us that we need better career development, better communication, better line management, the same that it tells every other organisation. What we're seeing is in consumer organisations and now increasingly with employees, we're seeing a reflection of the different types of data and insights that you can get from consumer marketing. So we have pulse surveys, little and often, obsessing about how our people feel about us. You know, if you think about the way in which you can't even walk through security at an airport now without touching a smiley face or a miserable face, there is an obsession about frequent, little, often, knowing how you feel about us. And that's what we should be replicating. So we're seeing pulse surveys. We're even seeing some organisations, the chief exec sends a text message to his employees once a week with a question which is, how is work for you this week? It doesn't cost them anything. It's conversational, it's human, and the chief exec then uses that insights that come back in his weekly email. So little and often, obsessing about how our people feel about us. We're seeing a greater use of Glassdoor. Amazes me that some organisations still say, you know, we don't actually like Glassdoor. Well, it's kind of, that ship has sailed, you know, that's too late. In fact, there was one organisation, a law firm, that decided to sue Glassdoor. They were getting feedback on there from their employees, things like, it is psychological torture to work here. And instead of thinking, maybe we have a problem, maybe we need to do something about this, what they did was they decided to sue Glassdoor, thereby ensuring that everybody knew it's psychological torture to work at this particular law firm. How stupid is that? So, using Glassdoor, L'Oreal, what they do is they review the verbatim comments on Glassdoor at their board meeting because they say it's so important to understand what people are saying about them in the marketplace, and they're absolutely right. We're seeing qualitative surveys. Virgin Trains, what they do is they have a qualitative researcher who'll go out with a train driver, who'll go out with a chef on a train, or spend the day with a customer service assistant. And what they're looking for is, how does their day map out? You know, when do they see that a leader, if at all? When are they particularly stressed? When are they using a smartphone? When are they with their team members? Do they have any downtime at all? And using then and understanding how they can use the profile of their day to provide interventions around learning, performance management, communication based around the employee, rather than when it suits the organisation. And this is the second thing that consumer marketing does brilliantly and that we need to learn in organisations. We need to understand that we cannot just provide one size fits all. We have to segment, we have to personalise, we have to consumerise the workplace, because that's what we expect in our human lives. Outside the workplace, we expect a level of personalisation that we just don't get in the workplace. You know, when I was an HR director, I can't believe it, but I was really proud that I had a one-size universal process for everything. And why would I be proud of that when I had groups of employees who had very, very different needs? So we're seeing organisations beginning to segment and personalise based around the real needs of their employees. So, for example, Starbucks, they analyse their employees on the basis of, why do people want to work here? And they came up with 3 types. They had the careerist. The careerist was someone who was very ambitious, who wanted to work at Starbucks for a long time, who wanted to get promoted. You then had the artistes, they called them the artistes. And these were people who loved working at Starbucks, wanted to stay at Starbucks, but for them it was all about their local coffee shop, it was about their team, it was about their local community. And finally they had the skiers. And the skiers were those people who were working at Starbucks for the cash, so they could go skiing or pursue whatever other passion they had. Three very different groups of people, very different needs. They then designed career development support based around the types of needs they had and provided different options. A consumer mindset, not one size fits all. We have the example of Wipro. So Wipro is a business process outsourcing organisation in India, had very, very high staff turnover. And they said, how on earth are we going to reduce this? And they decided to use the onboarding process. And they said, what if we, instead of an onboarding process being around telling people what's expected of them, broadcast, getting them to conform with us, how about if we used it to find out what is special and different about every person who joins us? So they, in the onboarding period, they did a problem-solving exercise, and they shared the results of that problem-solving exercise with the hiring line manager. Now, the rubbish line managers will do nothing with that level of insight. They just won't. But let's kind of not worry too much about them. Let's focus on the ones that might be able to do something a bit differently. So the line managers had new insights and were able to say, actually, this person likes to learn just by being left alone to get on with stuff. This person likes to learn through other people. So let's provide a different kind of social environment for them to get to grips with their new job. This person likes to do through trial and error. This person likes to have a lot of supervision. So I'm going to need to keep an eye out for this person and do a bit more hand-holding with this individual. Their turnover dropped 33% in the first 6 months, just by taking a very different consumer mindset and segmenting and personalizing and customizing, in this instance, the leadership style during the onboarding process. So, we've looked at employees as adults, employees as consumers, finally human. And as an HR director, I used to very often go home at night and think, am I doing anything that is of real value to this organization? So much of what I did was develop big, bulky, heavy processes because I didn't trust managers to manage properly. And actually, when you look at those processes, the vast majority of them were not based around how human beings think, feel, behave, are intrinsically motivated, communicate with one another, learn. Let's just look at some examples. Let's take learning. So we still put people on long training programs, a day-long training program, a week-long training program. The human brain will have forgotten 80% of what it learnt on that training program within 30 days. What a complete waste of time. So instead, we're seeing learning and development being based around how humans do learn, just-in-time learning, micro-learning, much more video-based, much more social learning, learning on the job rather than the traditional training program. Let's look at reward. We spend significant amounts of money in organisations on the annual bonus scheme. I have introduced bonus schemes, taken away bonus schemes, tinkered with bonus schemes. There is no joy in an end-of-year bonus scheme. They do not motivate people at all. What we tend to get is at best a sense of entitlement. Yeah, I got that last year. So instead, if we look at how people feel valued and rewarded, it's little and often. It isn't about a big lump sum at the end of year, net of tax. What it is small gifts that surprise and delight, that are thoughtful, that are timely, based around when you've put that extra effort in, when you did that brilliant thing for your boss. So we're seeing organisations moving away from the big set annual bonus and instead looking at much more frequent rewards. People are likely to feel 8 times more valued, 8 times more appreciated, and feel 8 times more engaged if you reward frequently rather than the one big set piece. And finally, as an example of where we're seeing a real change and an adoption of more human practices is in the area of performance management. So performance management, the annual appraisal, was designed because we didn't trust managers to have a human conversation with their people. That's it. That's all we wanted. We wanted people in organisations to have conversations to help them perform a little bit better. But because we didn't trust managers to do that, we created this huge, big, bulky process, which means that we have objectives set at the start of the year, then we review in the mid-year or the end of year, we give them a rating. If we look at how people improve their performance, they hate to be categorised, so being given a rating actually leads to people feeling very defensive, they resist it. We save feedback up to give it all in one go at the end of the year, and yet we know that the human brain, if it's going to change behaviour and adopt new ways of working, it needs to be getting regular feedback, having regular discussions when the behaviour that needs to change is evidenced. We can't save it all up and give it all to people in one go. It just makes no sense whatsoever. So we're seeing organisations now getting rid of annual ratings and moving to more frequent conversations. We're seeing a move away from the annual setting of objectives to being much more frequent, and employees setting their own objectives because they're much more likely to be motivated if they've set it for themselves rather than had it handed down to them. Human practices. So, in summary, if we are going to create organisations that are equipped for the future, if we're going to have people in our organisations that are capable of being more agile, more innovative, more collaborative and more productive, we have to stop parenting them. We have to stop providing big, bulky, one-size-fits-all processes, and we have to stop putting in place processes based around the fact that we don't trust managers that in fact don't help human beings to change how they behave. If you're interested in looking at your organisation and how it marries up to the EACH model, there's a free diagnostic on our website, www.disruptivehr.com, and you'll get a customised report for your organisation. I hope this has been useful. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the webinars and videos that you're getting from Elevate, and I've really enjoyed talking to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy, for such a great kickoff, and thanks to each of you for joining us. Our next live keynote is this afternoon at 3 p.m. Central Time. Sean Thomas Brightfield will take a look at the fascinating results from the Race to Lead survey. We look forward to seeing you there.